Thank you for watching this video on trauma-informed support for people with disabilities in detention. My name is Vanessa and I work at Just Detention International. Just Detention International, or JDI, is a health and human rights organization that seeks to end sexual abuse in all forms of detention. We work with corrections officials, rape crisis advocates, and policymakers to make detention facilities safer. In this video, we will discuss trauma and sexual abuse. Some of this may be difficult to hear. If you have concerns or need support, please seek guidance from your supervisor before watching this training video. Did you know that people living with disabilities are the largest cultural group in the U.S.? Yet, they are one of the most underserved groups in our communities nationwide. Not surprisingly, people with disabilities are overrepresented in prisons and jails, where they are among the most at risk for all types of abuse, including sexual assault. In this video, we will be focusing on how to work with people with disabilities in a trauma-informed manner. My goal is to help you understand what the term disability means, deepen your awareness of what it means to live with a disability in detention and the challenges incarcerated people with disabilities commonly encounter, and identify best practices for working with incarcerated people with disabilities, recognizing that these steps will increase safety for the entire population in your facility. What is a disability? The Americans with Disabilities Act defines a disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. The main categories of disability include physical, developmental, or cognitive, intellectual, and sensory disorders. Physical disabilities affect a person's mobility, movement, strength, or coordination, and include cerebral palsy, spina bifida, paralysis, and arthritis. Cognitive disabilities affect a person's thought processing and include Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorders, and fetal alcohol syndrome. Sensory disabilities affect any of the senses: sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste. These disabilities may also affect communication. It is important to note that while deaf people in the United States are covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, many of them do not identify as having a disability, but as members of a cultural group with language, customs, and shared norms. While certain mental illnesses may be considered disabilities, we will not be addressing the specific needs of incarcerated people with mental illnesses here. For example, those living with anxiety or depression. Please keep in mind, however, that the best practices we will review for working with people with disabilities are also applicable to your work with people with mental illness. In fact, these best practices will enhance your communication with everyone in this facility's custody. People with disabilities experience a variety of challenges while incarcerated. Their experiences in the community of being marginalized and acutely underserved often are intensified inside prisons and jails. For example, incarcerated people with disabilities rely on staff and other incarcerated people for assistance with their daily needs more than people without disabilities. Survivors with disabilities often have complex trauma histories. Some of the factors that leave people with disabilities more vulnerable to sexual abuse and other violations while in custody are: a very high percentage of people with disabilities have experienced prior sexual abuse and other traumas prior to incarceration. These traumas can create challenges around communication and handling potentially stressful situations. People with disabilities tend to suffer violations of privacy, personal space, and boundaries on a regular and consistent basis. Vulnerabilities of people with disabilities is often driven by a lack of information about sexuality, sexual abuse, and personal safety strategies. And there is a common expectation of absolute compliance from caregivers. People with disabilities are commonly seen as lacking credibility when they report sexual abuse, both in the community and in prisons and jails. Part of making your facility safer is taking all reports of sexual abuse seriously. Accessibility is about more than just making sure people can get around physically. People with disabilities may have limited access to programming and services and require accommodations to make these places, programs, and information accessible. For example, people with low vision should not have to rely on sighted people to read things for them that should be in large print or braille. These challenges increase the risk incarcerated people with disabilities face of experiencing sexual abuse. Keep in mind that an accommodation is a modification to the way things are usually done. For example, the use of a ramp instead of stairs, or providing an ASL interpreter for a person who is deaf. It's about making sure things are more equitable so that people with disabilities can make use of the same spaces, programs, supports, and opportunities to thrive as a non-disabled person. Accessibility and accommodations are not special treatment or privilege. They are a basic need and legal right. Ensuring accessibility includes eliminating barriers to participation and engagement, such as in facility programs, and being aware of what is needed so that people of all abilities can experience life to the fullest extent possible in ways that work for their minds and bodies.
My name is Pinky Shear. My pronouns are she, her. I am a formerly incarcerated mom. I am disabled. I have fibromyalgia and I have another autoimmune disorder which causes chronic pain issues. I also am very ADHD and I have a lot of complex CPTSD. So part of the issues that I was struggling with while I was incarcerated is that having an invisible illness, something along the lines of fibromyalgia or lupus, is one of those things where it's easy to be disregarded by the guards who don't believe or see that you have a disability at all. When it comes to any form of disability that they physically cannot see, it's going to be you're making it up because you don't want to do this or because you want to cause problems. And honestly, most people who are incarcerated don't want to cause problems. They want to be left alone. They don't want to start issues with the guards. They're not trying to get attention. They just want to do their time and be left alone. A lot of the training that I do is telling officers it's not personal and reminding them that this person's disability, they didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to have this and I'm going to do this because I want to irritate this officer today. No one's existence is an attack on somebody else's beliefs or their job. I think that the first thing that I would like for them to know is to respond to a situation slowly. With some patience. Instead of looking at it as a dangerous situation, maybe try to be a little bit more open-minded and open a dialogue. 9 times out of 10, this person is just needing somebody to talk to. This person just needs somebody to help them make it through this moment, whatever is happening with their body or in their mind. And that is the most important thing.
Remember that people with disabilities deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Language is one of your most important tools to accomplish that. Ensure that communication with and about people with disabilities is inclusive. One way to do this is by making sure people with disabilities are included in all conversations that concern them, such as getting input from people with disabilities in your facility on related policies and practices before making decisions that impact their needs. Language and communication also needs to be respectful of a person's disability, and that means you speak to the person directly rather than the person supporting them, and you make sure that the person can actually take in what you are saying to them. For example, never expect a person who is deaf to read lips. Instead, ensure they have access to an interpreter or other necessary accommodations. Simple, clear language is better for everyone. The simpler the language, written or spoken, the less opportunity there is for confusion or misunderstanding. Shorter sentences and simple words are better for communication with anyone with a disability or not. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to make sure that people with disabilities receive the same information as people without disabilities. Consider the goal of the communication and how to make it accessible to everyone housed in your facility, and work on modifications that meet it. Seek out additional training from local advocates on working with people with disabilities, and identify disability advocates in your community who you can work with in your facility to help improve your work with people with disabilities. Ask people what they need instead of making assumptions, then follow through accordingly rather than doing what you think is best for them. Not only are these strategies better for people with disabilities, they will make your facility safer and help staff feel more comfortable in their jobs.
Common misconception is people that kind of like stereotype disabilities. You know, I seriously go out and I'm like, listen, not a single disability is the same. Not a single one. Not every deaf person acts like every other deaf person. You know, so that's the biggest thing. And even as the ADA coordinator, you know, I stress that. I'm like, this is a case-by-case assessment. I looked at the inmates who I knew were truly deaf. You know, they were miserable. You know, because that's a language barrier. That's so hard to overcome. You know, so I definitely help them find a voice, you know, within our facilities, and that kind of spawned, you know, the driving force that I got them involved in a lot of stuff. I helped them become, you know, inmate workers and stuff like that, because they wanted to get out of their pod. You know, they wanted to have a purpose while they were incarcerated. You know, if you take the initiative, you're going to make an impact.
Thank you for your attention during this video. For further information and resources, please visit JDI at justdetention.org.